It's a little bit of news. We've moved around from Birmingham to Atlanta to Nashville and now Dallas. And in 2025, we're going to return to Atlanta in the College Football Hall of Fame with our football media days. I also want to say thank you to Regions Bank, who is a year-long sponsor, but the sponsor of our media days. They also played a key role in something called SEC Startup. I promise you, I'm almost at the end, so I'll catch you on this one. This is a competitive business pitch competition among our student athletes who are the future entrepreneurs. They make a presentation and a pitch competition with their business concepts presented and reviewed by a panel of judges. It will be shown on a program tonight on the SEC Network at 7 Eastern, SEC Startups Debut. It includes student athlete entrepreneurs from Auburn, Florida, Missouri, and Oklahoma, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the SEC Network. We're about to jump into questions. I'm going to go back and say there's a lot that's happening. There's a lot that could cause us to say, wow, where's the hope in this? Where's the finish line? I actually sometimes think finish lines are too much of a focus because we have to look to the future. And as much as there may be that's viewed as problematic, those successes I mentioned just scratch the surface. We haven't told a lot of individual stories, but they're there. And I'm optimistic about our future because I get to spend time with the leaders in the Southeastern Conference, the leaders today and the young people who will be leaders tomorrow, which is why through all of this change, I'm convinced our best days are still ahead. So thank you for being here. If you're in Dallas and Kevin Trainer's here, you know it's a big event. And so Kevin is going to help guide us through our question and answer period.
Thank you, Commissioner. If you do have a question, please raise your hand. We do ask that you give your name and affiliation before asking your question. I have Grant, Dylan, and Dinah who will get us a microphone. Commissioner, we're going to start over here to our left, about midway back.
I guess we should have written them on a card and I could have called on you, but we're a little bit more open, so here you go.
This works. Thanks, Greg. Matt Houston, WFAA. Can you expand on why we're in Dallas today and what makes the communities along the I-35 corridor from Austin to Norman a cultural fit for the SEC?
A few things. One, we actually made an effort to move here in 2018 with Media Days, thought that Dallas might be the right first place. We have an incredible alumni population in the Metroplex, and we did some research on that back to 2018. I didn't have to go back and conduct that research. Again, it's one of the most accessible cities in the country. The variety of ways you can travel here allows you to run a 15K in Utica, New York, and be here for dinner by the end of a Sunday, like I did yesterday. Our move in 2018 was a recognition that we had moved west with Missouri and Texas A&M, with the border states in Arkansas and Louisiana with LSU. Made it sense not just to be at one. If we're going to be at more than one location, how do you touch the perimeters? We had a basketball tournament in St. Louis, Missouri, back in 2018, if I have my dates right, and so we were used to that movement. We've had 3 years to prepare for expansion, which is, I think, a record long time. And as we went through the expansion, that made Western events more and more important for us. And we pretty quickly decided to move Media Days. We looked at Houston, looked at Dallas, were the two that were our biggest focus. Here, the transition from Norman to Columbia, Missouri, Fayetteville, Arkansas, College Station, Austin, Texas, that movement's really easy. And we are a big part of Texas. Texas is a big part of us now. I've always seen coaches traveling here during my own travel. We've had a bowl game affiliation here for a long, long time, and all of those relationships combined to make it the right move for us. And I encourage you to have fun fitting that into a small soundbite.
Commissioner will go right in front of us in the middle aisle.
Hey, Greg. Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South. I know there's been probably a lot more important things with college athletics, but I was curious if there's a plan for an SEC tiebreaker system now that there's no divisions to be able to settle an SEC championship.
Yes, in fact, we had our athletics directors on a video conference Thursday where he provided an update. It is a lengthy plan, consolidated around, I think, 8 principles. We go back to our athletics directors at their next video conference. It's about 2 weeks away. We can finalize that anytime between now and the start of the season. We have an annual in-person meeting where any of the little pieces that have been identified for review can be refined and finalized. So absolutely.
Commissioner, we'll go over to your right. Dennis along the aisle.
Greg, Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports. Certainly the House settlement as proposed for the next 10 years limits some legal liability. But USA Today recently reported in the last 10 years, the NCAA has incurred $433 million in legal expenses alone. Anybody can sue anybody for anything, but how do you lower the temperature on that?
Part of the current settlement effort is to resolve, to the extent we can resolve as much as possible, to do just that. We're not alone in college athletics at being pursued from a litigation front. You saw what happened in the NFL Sunday ticket decision. You look at Major League Soccer, just doing research on Law 360. You can see the existing open lawsuits there. We clearly have had to think differently, and you can see that happening as decisions are made on policy. An element of the question is how much authority can be managed at a national level through the NCAA. That's clearly what's under full scrutiny. What can be managed at the conference level? If it's less nationally, how do you actually have Final Fours in college football playoffs if everybody's to have a different set of rules? I also would observe that when you look at litigation that exists at the professional level, it's not an indication that that model solves all litigation threats. The simple observation is we live in a litigious society, and we have to continue to make wise decisions informed by legal counsel and be prepared to defend those decisions that are made. Lastly, we're dealing with historic change, and again, people have written over time they should have changed sooner. The reality is, whether you take that opinion or not, the change is happening now.
Okay, we'll go all the way in the far back left.
Hey, Greg. Bruce Marshall from WHBQ in Memphis. Maybe I should get this to Jim Phillips at the ACC next week. But how closely are you following Florida State and Clemson's challenge to the ACC deal? And if they succeed, what sort of ramifications do you see for the entire college sports landscape?
Could you repeat that real question? We had you breaking up for just a bit.
Hold up a little.
Yeah, I think I got
Okay.
it. So the question is, how closely do I monitor what's happening in the ACC?
Yes, yes.
And then what are the implications? I pay attention. As I said, we're focused on our 16. I've said before at media days, I'm not a recruiter. My job is to make sure we meet the standard of excellence that we have for ourselves on a daily basis. That attracts interest. It's done that with the 2 universities that we've added this year. They're not the only phone calls I've ever had, but I'm not involved in recruitment. Our presidents have been clear that I am not going to entangle us in litigation around expansion. And so I pay attention, but I'm not engaged in those conversations. In fact, as I understand, the issue is agreements have been signed and decisions have been made among a conference, and the question is, are those going to be honored as they were established? And apparently that's for a court to decide now. The broader implications, obviously, if things change, then there's a new level of uncertainty. It already creates speculation that I think is counterproductive, but I don't spend an enormous amount of my time thinking about it. I certainly don't spend any time engaged in that recruiting activity because we're focused on our 16, and I want to be respectful of the difficulty that's currently faced with that issue, that set of issues within the ACC, and my colleague, Jim Phillips.
Okay, Commissioner, we'll go over to our far right, over on the far aisle on the right.
Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Podcast Network. You mentioned the regionality of the SEC and the name still meaning something to this conference. Can you ever see a college sports landscape in which you would feel like branching out of the southeastern part of the United States with your conference membership would be beneficial?
We're focused on our 16, period. You've seen how we've made decisions over the last decade plus for contiguous states to join. I think that's incredibly wise and provides remarkable strength. And I'm not going to guess about what happens next.
Okay, we'll go right in front of me, Commissioner, here on the front row.
Andrea Adelson, ESPN. As a follow-up to that, Greg, I think you said 16 is our today and 16 is our tomorrow in your opening remarks. And I just wanted to clarify, tomorrow, does that just simply mean tomorrow, or is that a long-term future tomorrow?
So the last three questions are part of the reality, which is I've responded now 3 times where our focus lies. Our focus is on our 16 members. I have a responsibility to pay attention, and I'm certainly not going to fuel speculation on what happens next. We can certainly remain at 16 for a long, long time and be incredibly successful.
Okay, we'll go right in front of you to the right, right in front of the front near aisle.
Yes, Commissioner Sankey, this is Drew DeArmond, WZZN Radio, Huntsville, Alabama. You worked with him throughout your entire career as commissioner on the other side of the headset with Coach Nick Saban. But what can he do to help our league continue to grow and navigate the ever-changing world of NIL and the transfer portal now as a member of the media and a voice of college football?
What can Nick do? Well, help us avoid rat poison would be the first on the list. He and I spoke, it was a couple of days after the announcement of his retirement, and I think one of Nick's observations that I think it's fine to share is the ability to be influential in a different role outside of coaching. He and I probably dealt with, well, you're doing this because Nick thinks it's competitively favorable. One of the things I found over time is Nick, in many ways, uniquely thought ahead on issues. Provided really deep and clear insight. And he and I have had any number of conversations over, this is my 10th year as commissioner, but I've been in the SEC for 23 years, and but for the 2 years he was with the Dolphins, we're in conversation throughout those couple of decades. So I think he can bring that clarity. I think he can bring an understanding that even I don't have dealing with these issues on the front lines as a head football coach, and I know he brings a love of the game overall to an analysis. And so I have seen him engage in conversations already in a big picture problem-solving way, and I hope that will continue. And he can evaluate my performance, since he's sitting in the room listening, my performance in answering that question.
Commissioner, go right in front of me, 3 rows back, Barry.
Barry Trammell, Tulsa World. Greg, you clearly knew a lot about Oklahoma and Texas 3 years ago when they agreed to come into the league. Learned a lot about them since then. What did you learn about them with your 2 visits to Norman and Austin in the last couple of weeks?
So the Austin visit was June 30th. The first on my priority list is don't be the last speaker between a crowd of thousands and Pitbull's performance. So that was a non-advantageous position, and we won't let that happen again. In both places, you saw the passion for their programs play out, and then in individual interactions while I walked around campus, either running on Sunday morning in Austin or Monday morning in Norman with a logo on and people doing a double take. It was fun to see in those communities displays of the SEC logo. At a leadership level, to have deep conversation about what the decision means for each campus, and me talking about what it means for the conference. I learned more about drone shows than I thought I would know, given the performances at both places. And I learned that both clearly meet what one of our athletics directors called the "it just means more" test. So that avid fan base that I spoke of earlier, that is in backward-looking surveys, Both Oklahoma and Texas bring that same type of avid fan base to a set of peer universities and peer athletic programs. I also learned it's hot in a tuxedo in Norman, Oklahoma on a football field late at night in July.
Okay, we'll go back in the center section, same area. It's right behind you. Kirk?
Kirk Bowles from the Houston Chronicle. Texas liked to think it ran things in the Big 12. I was curious what you would state as far as your expectation of Texas' influence and impact on the playing fields and in the boardroom.
I actually think I just answered that to Barry, that both are now part of a conference with peer athletic programs and peer universities. So they'll fit, and we'll fit together as 16.
Okay, we'll go over here to our right. Commissioner, over on the right-hand side. Yeah.
Hey, Commissioner. Steve Moulton.
Which side of it? There we go. Yep.
Right here. WZZN in Huntsville. I heard you and Dustin mention that there's no better time to be a college athlete than right now. But I do wonder, from talking to college athletes, what are their biggest concerns or issues that you hear from the players themselves?
What are the biggest issues? So I walked through some of them. One, that they dislike this notion of every state having a different set of rules around how name, image, and likeness is conducted. They dislike lining up in contests and not having an understanding that those on the other side are held to the same standards. Whether you want to believe it or not, they're not looking to be employees, and we've had pretty free-flowing conversations with them about what that may mean on what's perceived as a positive side and maybe the more problematic side. One of my really great conversations, Henry Coleman III, who plays basketball at Texas A&M, right after we announced expansion, Henry was on our men's basketball leadership council call and asked, when are they going to join? And I said, is that because you don't want to play your in-state rival, or you do? And he said, I want to play them as soon as I can. Our student athletes want great competition. They want the excitement of our stadiums and our arenas. They want to be against the highest level of competition. My reference to baseball is not accidental. I think the improvement of our baseball is in part about how our programs have positioned themselves, invested in facilities to attract coaching talent, and that attracts talented players who want to line up and compete against each other. Those are quick elements. They want to know that they're going to be supported. If they're injured, they want to be cared for. They want to know that they have mental wellness care and support available. They tell us that mental wellness area, they want us to eliminate any barriers or perceived roadblocks, them accessing that might be viewed as problematic. So maybe some distance from their coaching staff just so they can have a safe space when it's needed. And they want to play for a championship in a meaningful way.
Okay, Commissioner, we'll take one final question over to our left here on the near aisle.
Ralph's been diligent, so I'm going to call an audible too, to my right after. So two, Kevin.
Good morning, Commissioner. You talked repeatedly this morning about being focused on your 16. Can you talk about the impact that Texas and Oklahoma are going to have on league revenues and what your outlook is for the current TV contracts and what they can expect as far as bringing in more money?
Well, we don't parse out our money because we just add to. Our revenue is generated by 16. And clearly the revenue happens at a couple different ways. One is at a national level. So competitively, there are opportunities, whether it's the college football playoff, NCAA tournament revenues that are available. With more, you have more mouths to feed, but more opportunities to access those types of postseason revenue, the same with bowl games. You have conference revenue, so we have media contracts that can be adjusted. We have a network that draws eyeballs in on a national basis. All 16 of our schools combined to create that interest. And then at the local level, their positioning of their programs, whether it's football, basketball, gymnastics, baseball, soccer, how do they draw people in? How do they monetize that interest? All of those are, if you will, seamless across all 16 of our universities. And certainly when you add the history of both of those football programs, it creates interest. There's one place on the globe this fall where there'll be an F1 race and a college football game at the highest level, and that's in Austin, Texas. That's going to be an incredibly high demand ticket. You think about Texas playing at Texas A&M, the interest in that game. But I shared when Kentucky first visited College Station for football, they brought 10 to 12,000 fans because that's what we do together. That's why I don't break things out into just two. It's about 16 working together really well. I'm going to call on Ralph. Okay. I know your power, Mr. Moderator, but Ralph Russo from AP.
Thanks.
A New York Mets fan, but other than that, he's generally okay.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate that, and thank you, Kevin. Talked a lot about college sports needing to take control of its future and not necessarily allow others to dictate, but there's also been so much talk about how you need help from Congress to get this under control. So how do you balance those two things? Like, we can't do this alone, but we also have to